So welcome to this masterclass, the masterclass that is really focused on growing, healing, and improving the relationship that you have with yourself. So if you've noticed, or maybe you haven't yet noticed, that is ultimately the most important relationship in your life, I really want you to consider what is possible if you were to strengthen that connection that you have with yourself, how that might affect or influence all of the other circumstances in your life. So as you're pondering that, maybe you're printing off your workbook. We're putting the link to the workbook in the chat. Not a problem if you don't have access to a printer. This is definitely a resource that you will reference long after today. So at least if you don't have the workbook in front of you, at least really pay attention and consider what it is that I'm asking of you. Really try to utilize your own circumstances in every example that I have to offer. So there's a way to follow along, even if you don't have the workbook, but we'll send out this recording, and I would encourage you to really go back and fill in the workbook as I prompt you with certain questions, because I really want this to be a valuable resource for you for years to come. Okay, so why am I bringing you this lesson right now? Truthfully, it's because I don't want one more minute to go by before you know how to better understand why you feel the way you feel. I want you to recognize how you can create more confidence and use that confidence to create whatever it is that you want from your life. This masterclass is so important because every minute of every day, you are actively and unintentionally sabotaging yourself. And I know that that feels very exhausting, and hearing that can be very scary. But the good news is that with a very simple system and an awareness of when to use that system, you can eliminate the unnecessary suffering and the sabotage that happens without you even knowing it in all areas of your life. I use this system that I'm about to teach you to forgive people, to set boundaries, to love unconditionally. And truthfully, the loving unconditionally has happened first and foremost with myself. It was really when I started to strip away all of the conditions, like you're worthy of being loved when you weigh 130 pounds. You're worthy of feeling successful when you have a six-figure income revenue stream. You're worthy of feeling like a good mom when you finally have that line of communication open with your children. It wasn't until I stripped away all of those conditions and realized how worthy I was just because I am me. And that essentially by connecting conditions and reserving that love until that was what was getting in my way of creating everything that I wanted. I was the problem and I didn't even know it. So I've learned how to strip away all of those conditions and love and connect with myself right now. And to love and connect with myself every step of the way to creating everything that it is that I want. I learned how to use myself as the solution to my problems. I started to go after things that I never thought possible. The tool that I used as a safety net to overcome problems like drinking too much actually became my key to unlocking the universe and achieving things like this business that I was so gratefully reminded of this morning from a friend who texted me and said, you know what? This business impacts lives. And it was like, it totally made me start crying. It's going to make me cry right now because sometimes I need to be reminded of that. So I'm going to teach you my system for healing, growing, and improving the relationship that you have with yourself so that you have this safety net and you have your own key to unlocking the universe. And you might be thinking, okay, well, if this is such a simple system, then why haven't I learned this before now? And quite honestly, the answer is just that there hasn't really been the curriculum. You've never been exposed to these lessons. So today we're going to make a commitment before we go any further. I want you to make a decision to be willing to be open to these new concepts, to be willing to be uncomfortable. The unknown can be very scary, but I want you to just face that fear and just be willing to ask yourself some questions. So before we go any further, my name is Tracy Plushcourt. I'm the founder of Self-Made You. My goal is to make Self-Made You a household name. And I want that so badly because I know that when you learn these concepts, when you really create a connection and trust and reliance on yourself, you start to change every outcome in your life. It changes absolutely everything by equipping people with the one skill of creating a sense of self-control that they are equipped to change the way they feel so that they can create anything they want from their life is a revolutionary shift in how they've been operating. So I often like to give people some sort of like supporting evidence or give insight into what it is that I'm reading or the influences or influencers in my life. Eckhart Tolle is a big one. I have no idea how many times I've read this book. This morning I pulled it back out and I just started reading just the areas where I had highlighted or the areas that I have underlined. And I started to reflect back on how many years this book has been an influence and how it just keeps kind of circling back. And one of Eckhart's greatest messages that not only he has taught, but Jesus Christ taught, Buddha taught, is that a state of enlightenment is attainable. That you have that opportunity, you have the ability, it is possible for you to have that enlightenment here and now. It's possible to live free of suffering, free of anxiety, and free of neurosis. But to do that, you have to come to the understanding that our role as the creator of our own pain, that our minds cause problems, not circumstances, not people, not the world outside of us, that it's our own mind, because it has this nearly constant stream of thoughts, thinking about the past, worrying about the future. We make the great mistake of identifying with our mind, thinking that's who we are, when in fact, we are far greater than just our minds. Eckhart Tolle shows us how to connect with what he calls our inner being, our inner self. Some people call it our soul. But if you've never picked up this book, I highly recommend it. It's such great supporting information, concepts to think about and to ponder that go hand in hand with what it is that we teach here at Self-Made You. So, what is the real problem? The mind-blowing answer, in my opinion, it has nothing to do with circumstances. The problem is not how inadequate you feel when you compare yourself to other sizes or the way other people look or the other people's abilities. It's not your past mistakes. Those are not the problems. Or that you haven't yet reached the level of success that you deeply desire, or the lack of connection that you have with your significant other. That's not the problem. The real problem is that the education that you've had so far didn't have a standard or a curriculum on how to use your mind to solve problems and achieve goals. And without that education, we just operate on default. We react from pain instead of responding with control. Is it possible that our formal education system is ultimately responsible for our inability to thrive mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, and even socially? That it creates a lack of self-control. But we're going to solve that today. We are going to fill in the blanks. So the question actually becomes, what problem do you want to solve in your life? Or what goal do you want to achieve with what it is that you're about to learn? So I want you to turn to the page in your workbook that says decide. Okay, I just want you to decide right now, what problem do you want to solve? What goal do you want to achieve?
Someone is at the front door.
In the following areas of your life, I want you to just kind of think about the results that you have in your life. Think about the feelings that you most often experience. Think about the thoughts, the beliefs that you most often have. I want you to decide right now if that's a problem that you want to solve, or is there something that you want to change? And let me tell you why it's so important to decide. It creates awareness. How do you know that you even have a problem if you don't decide what it is that you want? How do you know if you have a desire to create something if you don't make that decision? So maybe you have a really strong desire to feel comfortable and confident in your own skin every morning when you get dressed. Maybe you have a strong desire to learn and grow from your setbacks without beating yourself up excessively. Maybe you want to have a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment when it comes to setting your goals. Maybe setting goals has always left you feeling depleted or defeated before you've ever started. Maybe you want to have a healthy and supportive connection with your friends. Maybe you want to have the self-acceptance or that positive body image and self-love that I talked about at the beginning. Maybe you want to create resilience and determination. Resilience is your ability to bounce back after the setbacks? How quickly can you bounce back? We're all going to have setbacks. Maybe you want to strengthen that resilience or have pride and satisfaction and a balanced work-life perspective. Maybe you want to create more empathy and understanding so that you feel emotionally secure. Maybe you want to have thoughts like, you know what? I am unique. I'm beautiful just the way I am. My worth is not determined by my appearance or the number on that scale. Maybe you want to start thinking that mistakes are actually an opportunity for you to learn from. And that failure is just the next step towards creating what it is that you want most. Maybe you want to believe that you are worthy of love and respect, and that you can contribute positively to every relationship in your life. Maybe you want to start believing that you are able to overcome challenges and that you deserve happiness and success. If you don't decide what your goal is because you're afraid of failing, then you essentially fail ahead of time. When you have a goal or an objective, your brain goes to work finding the ways to stop procrastinating or quitting on yourself. Deciding is like a GPS. You've got to enter in where it is that you want to go in order for it to accurately give you the steps to get there. So making a decision about what problems you want to solve or what goals you want to create, this is the antidote to the fear and the frustration. It's the way that you create self-control, making a decision. It's so important. So just take a few seconds, make sure that you've filled in or you've thought about what are the results that I want to create for myself? What are the feelings that I want to have? What kind of thoughts and beliefs are important to me? Make that decision right now and hold that close by. Have it at the forefront of your mind. And then when you're ready, turn the page. This next worksheet is going to prompt you to better understand and heighten your awareness around why you may be stuck or haven't yet achieved what it is that you want most. Because it's not that you're broken or that you're incapable. It's just that you hadn't decided and discovered what was actually sitting in the way. What was the obstacle? So I want you to ask yourself, why do I want to solve this particular problem? Or why do I want to achieve this particular goal? Is it, I want to feel confident and stop comparing myself to others? I want to stop second guessing every single thing I do. It's like I can't even make the most basic purchases or decisions without having to get somebody else's opinions. It keeps me from getting things done in my life. That's fair. That's a real deep desire for a lot of people. They are so hung up on not being able to trust their own opinion that they have to seek outside validation, outside opinions from others before they move forward. And then they wonder, why does everything feel so stuck? Why do I feel like I can never move forward? So understanding, discovering why you even want to achieve that goal is really important. I want to feel like I'm actually making progress. Now I want you to answer the question, am I willing to be uncomfortable? Because discomfort isn't to be feared. But I get it. I know that so many people have never trusted their own opinions. So using their own judgment feels really scary. But just ask yourself, are you willing to feel afraid? And think about all the times in your life when you've been afraid, and yet you're still here to tell the story of it. Discomfort isn't to be feared. Now I want you to ask yourself, what exactly is it that you're afraid of? What is that worst case scenario? Are you afraid of being judged? Maybe you've wanted to change the furniture in your living room, but you were paralyzed with fear about what your friends might think, or if that they might second guess your choices. Maybe you have always dreamed of having that beautiful magazine cover worthy home, but you spin out in fear and confusion and ultimately make no decisions. And then it has consequences where you don't want to have anybody over because you don't feel like you or your house is ever good enough. Isn't it interesting when you look at the worst case scenario of feeling ashamed of what it is that your house looks like or feeling like you're not enough? It's so interesting when you look at that. That's the worst case scenario, which is what's keeping you from actually pulling the trigger of changing out the living room furniture. And you're caught in this spin because of that fear. It's actually like that worst case scenario is happening right now, because what you're afraid of is being judged, and you're judging yourself right now. You're actually living out the worst case scenario right now. And then the last question that I want you to ask yourself is, how am I responsible for the experience that I'm having? It's such an interesting question because our brain is always looking outside of us for all of the circumstance or maybe other people or events as the reason to why we are having this experience, right? He doesn't communicate. He's never home. I just can't say no to chocolate. I don't have enough money, right? We are blaming all of the external circumstances, all of the external conditions. And that's okay. That's a very human thing to do. But I just want you to take a second and ponder, how are you responsible, not in a punitive sort of way, but what are you contributing to this experience? Just take a little bit of ownership, take a little bit of credit, because that ownership, that responsibility, that credit actually is the gateway to self-control. It's very counterintuitive, but it pays dividends when you ask yourself, how am I responsible for this experience that I'm having? Maybe you're somebody who constantly focuses on that finish line. Once I weigh 130 pounds, then I can be happy. Once I have the new furniture, then I'll be able to invite people over. And now you have reserved happiness for then. And you wonder why you're unhappy today. It's because of that perspective that you can only be happy when. Just notice that. that you are unintentionally believing that lie. It's totally normal. But we're going to explain to you why that even happens, why you even have that narrative in your head. So we now know, just to kind of back up and kind of look at where we've been, we've created an awareness of what it is that you want and where you're at in relation to where it is that you want to be. Now, I just want to take a quick second to teach you a little neuroscience, the science of your brain, because I want to emphasize that you are not broken. You are normal. You just haven't learned how to operate that mind of yours to get what it is that you want. You have unintentionally been believing what your mind has been offering you. Unintentionally is what needs to be emphasized here. It's you operating on default without awareness. And we're teaching you how to become more aware, to be more intentional, to have a heightened sense of what's actually happening so that you can respond instead of reacting. I think it's so interesting how we are taught what to think. If you think about your experience while in school, at whatever level you had, we have always been taught what to think. And then we're tested on our ability to memorize that information. We aren't taught to recognize our thoughts, to just see them without believing them, to actually watch how those thoughts unfold and most often sabotage us. We aren't taught that the way to creating what it is that you most want isn't a thinking game, it's a feeling game. We were never taught that. Why are these thoughts sabotaging us? They're being created by our primitive brain, the part of our brain that is very fear-based. Its intention is to keep us alive. It wants to avoid pain. It wants to seek pleasure. It wants to be very habitual. It doesn't want to expend a whole lot of energy. So it's all about the repeated nature of things. It happens to be the part of your brain that's responsible for the repeated breathing that you're doing. Thank God we don't have to think about breathing, right? So it's very purposeful. It's also the part of our brain that's responsible for keeping us from walking in front of a bus. So I don't want to demonize this part of our brain, but because it's primitive and it thinks that we're always in danger, it's offering us very dramatic thoughts. And if we're only operating from that part of our brain on default, and we're not in any danger, then it actually sabotages the results that we want. Out of the 60,000 thoughts we have in a day, 80% or more of them are coming from our primitive brain, which creates moments, days, weeks, years, lifetimes of unwanted relationships, unwanted results. And then, because our brain wants to be efficient, 90% of the thoughts that we had yesterday are repeated today. So recognizing, having an awareness of what those thoughts sound like is a really helpful tool to being able to turn down that saboteur narrative. So the judge, I think, is the one that most of us can relate to. It's very universal, where we're judging ourselves we're judging other people, we're judging circumstances. So it's so good to be able to shine a light on those particular saboteur narratives that are running our life, because you can't fight the enemy you can't see, right? So we offer a saboteur assessment. The link is on the first page of your worksheet, the agenda page. I highly recommend taking that assessment and finding out what narratives you are listening to and how your life is being impacted by listening to that narrative. And then if you want to forward me your results, I would love to give you a little free coaching on those saboteur narratives that you are most often listening to. So I'd say that that's a pretty compelling argument for why we would want to learn how to operate from the other part of our brain. So as you can see on this next worksheet, this infographic, the neuroscience of your self-made mind, you can see that the other part of the brain that I like to call your prodigy brain, it's the more extraordinary part of your brain. Scientists call it your prefrontal cortex. It's the intentional side. It does not run on default. You have to command this side to activate or to operate. This is the part of your brain that can access empathy, discovery, innovation. It's the part of your brain that you can navigate through your values, and you can take clear, concise, confident action. So I want you to turn the page. And now you know what is happening in your brain and why it's happening. You're just operating on default. Your primitive brain has a purpose. It's trying to keep you safe when you're not actually in any danger. And when you react to those dramatic thoughts, you end up sabotaging yourself. That's what happens when you are unaware, when you aren't actively managing your mind. You also know what it is that you want and why you want it. So let's talk about how to get it. It all starts with thinking of yourself as the solution. Think about that. You are not the problem. I want you to think of yourself as the solution. There are 4 simple steps to using yourself as the solution to any problem or achieving any goal. So the framework that we use is SELF, and on your worksheet, I just want you to write down these very simple definitions so that you have a basic understanding of what that acronym actually stands for, because this is what I want you to tap into every single day. So self-coaching is the first step. All that is the art of asking yourself questions. Very simple questions. Think about how seldom we do that. We don't slow down enough to even ask ourselves, how are we feeling? Why are we feeling that way? That is what self-coaching actually is slowing down and asking yourself, connecting with yourself. It can take 1 minute, it could take 10. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just ask yourself some questions. Slow down. The E is eliminating self-sabotage. Self-sabotage happens unintentionally when we aren't actively managing our brain because we are listening to those narratives that are just trying to keep us safe. But again, when we're not in any danger, it sabotages what it is that we want when we react to them. So instead, we want to respond. And you can only respond when you're operating from your prodigy brain. So eliminating that self-sabotage requires you to be aware of what it is that you're listening to, or aware of how it is that you're feeling, or aware of how it is that you're showing up. The self-coaching, that first step, creates awareness. So these 4 steps have to be taken in this order. You have to have an awareness, first and foremost. Once you have that awareness, now you can start to eliminate the self-sabotage, because you will not be reacting, you'll be noticing. That's how we eliminate the self-sabotage, the result, right? The narratives may still be there, but they aren't going to be screaming at you, and you're not going to be reacting to them. You're just going to notice them. And by taking that assessment, you have the advantage of knowing which ones are most common, which are the most prominent, which ones do you hear most often when your eyes open at the beginning of every morning. That awareness alone, that intentional awareness, is what has you knocking on the other part of your brain. You're at the door of your prodigy brain. Now that next step of leveraging strengths, the L, leveraging strengths, the third step, is an intentional usage of empathy. Noticing that you're a human. All of these human experiences are supposed to happen. You're supposed to experience contrast, or unwanted experiences, or unwanted or negative feelings, so that you understand and are ready and enjoy and love and appreciate the positive feelings, the contrasting experiences. That's what, when you're ready to recognize that, now you're feeling empathy for yourself for those times when you weren't ready, when you didn't know that. When you have more empathy for yourself, you extend empathy for other people, which, as you probably have guessed, starts to heal relationships. It always starts with the relationship that you have with yourself. So empathy for yourself is where it all starts. Making that connection with your inner being, your truest essence. That's a strength that you have within you. So leveraging those strengths like empathy, discovery, recognizing what other factors might be involved that you might not be seeing, innovation, where you can brainstorm all sorts of scenarios, all sorts of solutions, where you can ask yourself or remind yourself of what it is that really matters. What are my values? How do I use my values to take the next step? And then taking those steps, like activating with confidence, taking the next step with concise, consistent momentum. And then that fourth step of forging intentional results, again, that's the fourth and final step, because when you're leveraging that activate strength, you find yourself right there, ready to forge intentional results. And there's all sorts of best practices attached to whatever problems you want to solve or whatever goals you have for yourself? Of course, there's best practices. But as you can see, that's the fourth and final step. We want you to be taking your actions from a place of confidence, not a place of desperation. So you could Google best practices for losing weight. But if you're checking those boxes from a place of desperation, it's going to be an entirely different result than if you were checking those exact same boxes being driven by confidence. But for today, if you want to just write the definition of forging intentional results, it starts with deciding what it is that you want every single day, even every single hour, every minute. Decide what it is that you want and discover where you're at in relation to what it is that you want so that you can see that gap and you can start to ask yourself questions around that. Those are the intentional results that will create the most mind-blowing results in your life when you decide and discover, decide and discover, decide and discover. This is the operating system that once learned and applied becomes your exclusive, unparalleled source of guidance. And with practice, it becomes part of your DNA. Intentionally applying this way of operating strengthens your mental fitness. It creates awareness and belief and a profound connection with yourself. And as a result, with the people who matter most to you. You start to accept yourself and create a relationship with yourself that fosters growth and encourages even more personal development. You are in this constant state of becoming. Ultimately, empathy, understanding, growth, and control over your results are available to you and easier to achieve utilizing this simple framework. The impacts of having self-control are profound. So there's a space on your worksheet to jot this down. Teams, business teams, sports teams, competitive teams perform 31% better when they operate from their prodigy brain. Salespeople sell 37% more. People live 10 years longer and are 3 times more creative. And the best part of this operating system is that it has unlimited applications. So we're using it today to improve, heal, and grow the relationship that you have with yourself. But to be honest, it has unlimited applications. We have spent the last 3 weeks working on relationships with significant others, relationships with friends. What was the other one? Relationship with family members. Okay, I want you to realize it goes far beyond relationships. This is the operating system that you can use to create more money, to create more success, to become more productive, to become the leader that you want to become. 82% of the people using this system report improved relationships. 84% report better conflict management, and 97% report improved empathy. So go ahead and turn the page. What I want you to ultimately know is that this operating system is what you've always needed to know. It's not your fault that you hadn't yet been exposed to it. But this insight that you've gotten today is only 20% of the lasting change that you can create. It's just like the books that sit on your bookshelf. Even if you've read them, it's only 20% of the lasting change. 80% of lasting change is application. So what you've learned, this self-operating system, you've learned it. You've had the insight. That's 20%. Now I want you to create lasting change by using it, by practicing it. Okay, so I want you now to turn the page and let's apply this to a real life scenario. I want you to look back to the page where you decided what problem you want to solve or what goal you want to achieve. I want you to pick one result that you'd love to create for yourself. And I'm going to hold your hand through applying this system. So you know exactly how to do it tomorrow and the next day and every single day after. So the first step is pick one problem that you'd like to solve or one goal that you'd like to achieve. What is it that you most want? And the first step in the 4-step system using the framework self is self-coaching. And this is what I guided you through on that discovery page. So look back at how you answered. How are you feeling right now? Why are you feeling that way? What are you afraid of? How are you showing up when you're feeling afraid? Feeling fear can be very painful. Remember, one of the objectives of your primitive brain is to avoid pain. So it makes perfect sense that you have never wanted to even ask yourself these questions. And when you show up in a way that you're not taking action or that you're hiding, that you're shutting down or that you're lashing out, what kind of results are you creating for yourself? How can you take a little bit of ownership for how it is that you're showing up because you're being driven by a feeling that has been created unintentionally from your primitive brain that's only trying to keep you safe? You are just essentially reacting, therefore operating from the part of your brain that sabotages you because you didn't know that you had an alternative, that you could just notice that, accept it for a very normal function of your primitive brain. It's a very human-like experience. Just accept it. That acceptance has you now operating organically. You didn't even have to try. It has you operating now from your prodigy brain. So now you clearly know what you want, where you are in relationship to that, and how your feelings are keeping you from getting it. You can see how your feelings are being driven by these dramatic narratives that are supposed to be there. You're just not supposed to be reacting from them. You're just supposed to have an awareness of them. You're supposed to notice them. So that's step one. you can kind of check your work through whether or not you have an awareness of what's actually going on. So just check your work. Do you see that before you take step number 2? Eliminating that self-sabotage. Which narrative is hijacking you? How does this make sense? You probably have well-developed neural pathways and coping techniques that have worked for you in the past. It makes sense that you're triggered and that you react and that you never stop and question the validity of that narrative. It makes total sense. You're human, having a human experience. You are capable of feeling anything. But when you're ready to feel something different that will actually perpetuate the results that you want, you know how. You have these 4 steps in your back pocket. That's how you eliminate the self-sabotage right there. Asking yourself, how does this make sense that I'm having this very human experience? This is what creates, it just ignites that flicker of empathy and gets you to step 3. Leveraging the strengths that are available to you only from your prodigy brain. You are not fundamentally broken or bad. Your brain has just been operating as it was designed. And you're learning to question those saboteur thoughts instead of reacting. So with that little bit of empathy for yourself, that will start to spill over into empathy for others, empathy for circumstances. That will start to trigger you to start looking at things through a different lens. You'll start discovering other factors that might be involved that you were unable to see when you were operating from your primitive brain. You can ask yourself, how can this experience that might be catastrophic at first glance, how could it potentially become a gift or an opportunity? So now that you're knocking on that prodigy brain's door, you stay intentional. I love right here to take 3 deep intentional breaths, reminding myself that I'm human. I'm having a human experience. I'm capable of feeling any feeling. And when I'm ready, I know how to shift, how to control what it is that I'm thinking, how it is that I'm feeling. I know how to shift from that primitive brain narrative to the prodigy brain. I can ask myself those intentional questions like, how could this become a gift and an opportunity? Notice how that feeling of empathy has led you to discovery and even a little curiosity and innovation, which is a stark difference from where you started. You can already see the progress. And now you're at step 4, where you can intentionally, you forge intentional results. This is a decision to create best practices, to commit time every day to doing exactly what we just did, along with other best practices that you have found to work for you. So when it comes to weight loss, a lot of my clients know that making decisions ahead of time is a best practice. They make a decision, they create a protocol for what it is that they're going to eat and when. They have made a best practice of limiting sugar and flour. They've made a best practice of intermittent fasting. Yes, there's best practices involved with everything. But forging intentional results starts with making a decision, being intentional every single day. looking at where you're at in relationship to where it is that you want to be, and using the answer to that to really start to self-coach on, asking yourself, why am I creating that result? Why am I experiencing this right now? How can I take credit for that? In what ways am I contributing to that? Forging intentional results is the fourth and final step. You have to make sure that you're taking steps 1 through 3, and then it organically leads you into forging intentional results. This, my friend, is the application. It's the process that creates new results, new experiences, new feelings, ultimately a new way of operating and living your life. This is an example of how easy it is to create awareness of how you are creating your experiences. This experience sparks belief that you are not the common denominator to all of your problems, that you should start believing that you yourself are the solution. This is the process that will have you understanding yourself and connecting with yourself more. And most importantly, taking control, making decisions to create lasting change. And we offer lots of ways to continue practicing this and operating from your prodigy brain. I encourage you to lean in and find the unlimited applications that this way of operating will change your life. You can turn the page and you'll see all of the free resources that we offer. I'd be happy to take some questions if there are any. Gracie, are there any questions in the chat that you want me to answer?
No questions.
Okay. Anybody have anything that they want to? Feel free to come off of mute. I'm going to stop the recording.